Can Argentina win the World Cup? Well, yes, obviously. But you probably already knew that. A better question is, what makes this team so good? Why do so many people have them as tournament favourites? And how on earth have they gone 35 games unbeaten? And those are the questions we're going to answer today. Enjoy. So welcome back, guys. I promised you World Cup coverage and here it is. Yes, today we're looking at Argentina and I'm going to jump straight into what makes this team tick and the general philosophy that Lionel Scaloni has embedded into this squad. One that has been so successful, winning the Copa America, going unbeaten for over 3 years, etc, etc. And let's start with the ball. So this is a team that is reasonably modern in possession, I would say. They build up with control, they play through the lines, and are pretty patient. But it's by no means an obsessive positional system like you'll find in a lot of European club teams. It's a bit more fluid. In terms of shape, they've used a couple of different systems, but they're really just variations on the same theme. Think of it roughly as a 4-3-3, but you take one of the wingers and give them complete freedom of the pitch. Of course, we're talking about Messi, and we're going to be talking a lot about him in this video. But anyway, that leaves you with really one centre forward, usually Lautaro Martinez, and one natural winger, and the first choice is Di Maria. And on the other flank, the width will be provided by a fullback, and that's what gives you this sort of shape here, with De Paul and Paredes in the middle acting as sort of a double pivot. These two are pretty much the pillars of this team, both offensively and defensively, and you've got Messi floating around ahead of them. And when it comes to build-up, these are the three that are the key ingredients, I'd say. So even as deep as this, Messi is Argentina's most important progressive tool, because he'll very often drop in beside Paredes and De Paul, picking the ball up as the free man and using his ridiculous passing range and vision to bypass pressure and move it into more dangerous areas. Like I alluded to, he's given absolute freedom to do this, so he might actually be playing as a right wing on paper, but he drifts centrally pretty much all the time, which is partly what makes him so difficult to pick up. But giving a player like this freedom needs to be accounted for, and Argentina do that using this man, Rodrigo De Paul, who is easily one of the most crucial players for this side. He plays what I would call a sort of hybrid role, effectively reacting to whatever Messi is doing. So when Messi is further up between the lines, De Paul acts as a sort of pivot beside Paredes, like we saw earlier. But when Messi drops deeper, which he does frequently, De Paul then pushes up and becomes more of an interior in the right half space. It reminds me a bit of the role that Arturo Vidal used to play for Ernesto Valverde's Barcelona, if any of you are familiar with that. It requires a very fine balance between physicality and technicality that not many players could execute. This relationship between De Paul and Messi is one of Argentina's most important, and the interchanging movement is not only hard for an opponent to pick up, but getting players ahead of Messi like De Paul here is Argentina's main progressive strategy. And it really leads on to what typifies them as a team, which is central combinations between the lines. Argentina love creating these kind of situations, players in close proximity between the lines, and finding passing combinations into more dangerous zones. I haven't mentioned the left interior yet, and they do play a big role in this, essentially acting as a number 10 to receive these passes between the lines, either directly from midfield, or as the third man receiving from the centre forward. This left interior is usually Giovanni Lo Celso, but unfortunately he will be injured and we'll talk a bit later about his possible replacements. But unlike De Paul, this left interior is positioned pretty much permanently between the lines, making him the go-to progressive option as Argentina attack from right to left. And when he's not dropping deep, Messi also takes up these positions on the right hand side, which usually spells big trouble for the opponent. So all in all, it's pretty vertical, pretty centrally focused, with Messi of course at the heart of it. That's not to mention Di Maria, who provides the all-important natural width, or Lautaro Martinez, who's both a great link-up player and an unpredictable goal threat. And both of these players add a lot of quality and variety to Argentina's attacks. In fact, aside from the control build-up, they do have more strings to their bow and in some ways are perhaps even more devastating without the ball. So let's now talk a little bit about pressing. A major part of what makes Argentina so difficult to beat is something that requires not one but two sections for me to do justice, which is their aggression off the ball. And the first way that manifests itself is through their counter press. In other words, winning the ball back immediately after losing it. This really should be seen as an extension of your attacking philosophy, and it's one of the benefits of getting your forward players close together, like we just discussed. When you lose it, there are other players around to win it back. Of course, you need the mentality and the coaching, so players respond quickly when the ball is lost, and these things are definitely there. But the extra ingredient that Argentina have is the attributes of their attacking players, which just as notably as their technical quality, is the athleticism and aggression. Lautaro Martinez, Rodrigo de Paul, Di Maria, Paredes, Lo Celso, all very mobile, very aggressive players who aren't afraid to put a heavy challenge in, and who are backed up by two of the most all-or-nothing defenders on the planet, and we'll get to them. But the point is, you don't simply play out of an Argentinian counter-press. And that's one of the ways they make it very hard for the opponents to get any kind of forward momentum. This of course extends to their general philosophy out of possession, where unsurprisingly they have the capacity to press very high, and that can be as simple as going man-to-man, complemented by a high line as Argentina try to force mistakes high up the pitch. And that brings me back to those kamikaze centre-backs, Christian Romero and Nicolas Otamendi, because when the ball does go forward, they are supremely aggressive in backing up that press. These aren't the type of defenders to stay in the comfort of their back line. No, any hint of a free man receiving the ball and they are rushing up into midfield to close them down, legally or otherwise. All of this aggression means Argentina force a lot of turnovers, and from these positions, rather than put together the patient build-up like we talked about earlier, they're very proactive in trying to exploit the opponent while they have players caught ahead of the ball. Between Messi, Lautaro, and especially Di Maria, who's often the outlet in counterattacks, they can go back to front in the blink of an eye. You might have the impression by now that this is an all-action team, very vertical and very aggressive, and that is true for the most part. But what Argentina really have going for them is their ability to be adaptable. Offensively, we've already seen this. They're capable of playing a patient build-up game through the lines, or they can blitz through you after a turnover. And actually, with a player like Lautaro Martinez, they very much have the option of going direct from the goalkeeper too. And all of this versatility is just as present in the defensive setup, which brings us to probably the core reason why Argentina have been so hard to beat in these last 3 years. These boys can defend. So while Argentina can and do press high, they're not afraid to be pragmatic when the situation calls for it. And more often than not, they'll end up in sort of a mid-block. After all, Messi isn't going to give you a relentless press for 90 minutes. But they can, as well as this, become a low block, staying very compact, shutting down the central areas, and despite being deeper, still showing the same aggression that characterises this team from front to back. At international level, where you're very rarely playing against a polished attacking system, the ability to press high, sit in a mid-block, and become a low block is a big deal. And the most impressive part is, they're mature enough to be able to shift into different modes depending on the game state and opposition. So in the same half against Italy, we saw both a high press and a very low block. The shape we talked about earlier makes this really easy to accomplish, by the way. When you need to sit back, you just have Messi and Lautaro up front, and you shift into a 4-4-2 with De Paul and Paredes in the middle, Di Maria and Lo Celso out wide. And in some situations, they can even go into a back five, using a player like Nicolas Gonzalez as your winger, who then becomes a wingback. Really, as long as you have the core of Paredes and De Paul in midfield, plus Romero and Otamendi at the back, breaking down this team isn't fun. It really isn't fun. And it's so unfun that no team has been able to do it effectively for over 3 years, which I think is a good place to move on to this final section, where we'll talk about what, if anything, could stop this team from winning the World Cup. So I've already alluded to most of the fundamental pillars of this team. In an attacking sense, it's obviously Messi. He's at the start and end of most attacks, responsible for deep progression, the final pass, and very often the final touch as well. He's back on top form for PSG. This is his last chance to win it, etc, etc. But none of that should detract from the well-oiled machine around him. From De Paul and his hugely demanding role, to Lautaro's versatility, Di Maria's width and threat in transition, and the whole defensive unit that really Messi has nothing to do with. But with such a well-oiled machine comes a problem. What happens if one of the key parts breaks down? Because in the case of Giovanni Lo Celso, Argentina are losing a key part of their machine. A number 10 who, while being technical and creative enough between the lines, is still a serious athlete and a ball winner capable of playing even in a tight and aggressive low block. It's very likely he'll be replaced in principle by Alexis McAllister, who offers, in theory, a similar balance between attack and defense, although is not quite as technically proficient between the lines. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got the likes of Papu Gomez, a player who I like quite a lot, is technically excellent, but isn't nearly as responsible defensively. So with Lo Celso out, it's a hard position to balance. As far as losing key players goes, Lo Celso probably isn't the end of the world, but the point remains, one more important big injury, and I won't say to who because I don't want to jinx it, but that would really hurt this team. Don't get me wrong, there's a decent amount of depth in this squad, particularly in defence where Lisandro Martinez could step in. The fullbacks are pretty interchangeable. You've also got the promising Enzo Fernandez as a midfield backup, though he's only got a couple of caps so far. But there's a few really key players here that would be catastrophic to lose. Again, I won't even say who. But voodoo aside, Argentina are clearly in an excellent place going into this World Cup. Offensively flexible, you've got the best creator in the world, a consistent goal scorer, and a defensive unit that is not just adaptable but terrifying to play against. On ability, mentality, maturity, of course, Argentina can win the World Cup. But will they? Thanks for watching everyone, consider leaving a like if you enjoyed, but more importantly, make sure you're subscribed. We've got more of these previews coming up before the competition starts. Plus, I'll be doing match and player analyses throughout the tournament. It's going to be a lot of fun, so I hope you join me for the ride. Let me know who you think is winning the World Cup. Can Argentina do it? Will this be the time for Messi? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, have a good one. Take care.